Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious. Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 634 for April 26, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us this week, everybody. I'm very excited as we turn the calendar year, at least in terms of film, to the summer. We are shifting phases from the spring to the summer. As of this week, it begins.
Summer is the movie version of winter, I guess, because that's the start of the actual year, right?
Yeah, exactly. I almost exclusively run on the film calendar. I don't really care what the stars are doing and how the planets are aligned and what the Gregorian calendar says. That's not how I run my life.
It's so confusing to me because at my job, we run on things called program years, which always end on May 31st and then begin on June 1st, which is even more confusing when you run a podcast that goes by movie rules simultaneously.
Yeah.
So it's gotten to a point, I don't even know what day it is anymore. I don't even know where I am.
It could be confusing, especially if you live your life based on elements like that, whether it be that project you're alluding to or sports. You know, because
God forbid sports make it all the more confusing.
Yeah, I'm deeply embedded in the hockey sphere. Obviously, right now the Stanley Cup playoffs are happening, and their season essentially runs from October to June. Is when the Stanley Cup is awarded. So that's the calendar year. So that's one. I feel like that's one calendar I go by. I'm also a big football fan, and that's October to January, February-ish. So that's another calendar.
I was going to say, for most people, I feel like their years end in February when the Super Bowl happens, right?
Exactly. So, but even beyond those two, and those calendars are very, very much a part of my week to week and how I plan throughout the year. But more than anything else, because we do this podcast every single week, and we see movies every week, we talk about movies all the time. That is the number one calendar that I go by.
Okay.
And there's two different calendars, even within that bubble. There's the yearly calendar, and then there's the InSession Film calendar. And our calendar is slightly off by about 2 weeks. We do our year-end InSession Film Awards about the second week in January. We give ourselves a little bit of a buffer to make sure we see everything that we need to see before we do the InSession Film Awards. So that's off by about 2 weeks. So by the time we do our yearly previews, it's not January 1st. For us, it's like January 20th, you know? So
that's very fair.
It's off just ever so slightly. So there's that calendar, but there's the broad film calendar, which the summer season, by all accounts, at least these days, really begins that first week in May. That's a huge weekend for Hollywood. A lot of blockbusters stage that first weekend in May is one of the big kickoffs.
Technically, yes, that is very true. But given the surprising success of Sinners, could the year of 2025, the summer has started maybe a little bit earlier, I guess you can say.
I mean, you could certainly make that argument for sure. In my head, the summer calendar always begins with May to August. That's how I've always accounted for it in my brain. But for all intents and purposes, especially when we're talking about Hollywood, the box office success, how that propels the industry forward.
If box office success is an indicator as to when the summer technically starts, then I guess the summer season has already started. Just given that early success, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's great to see a movie like that do as well as it is, because as we're recording this, it might make just as much second weekend as it did its first weekend. That's pretty awesome
Yeah.
for a movie like that.
Oh my gosh, it's been incredible. So far, this film has made $121 million worldwide. It has done $90 million domestically. So whoever was writing the think pieces last week, getting ahead of themselves that, oh no, Sinners has a lot of work to do to make up its budget and marketing. Like, get out of here with that nonsense.
Did that article pick up some steam? Maybe that's why people are going to see it, to try to save it, just given that. If that was the case, then that is really, really lucky marketing. if that was the case.
Mean, I think all that is variety, as with what the trades do these days.
As usual.
There's just no integrity. It's all about clickbait and getting those clicks. And it didn't take long.
It's backfiring on them for that reason.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the Ben Stiller tweet from last weekend. He tweeted that article and was basically like, you guys are out of your mind. And it didn't take long. It was, I want to say it was that day, like later that day. They didn't necessarily print a retraction, but there was a different article.
There was another article that basically talked about
headline.
just the praising of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. The backpedaling has begun already. It's like, get out of here. We all knew that Sinners was a massive success. And yeah, it was very exciting to see that it had less than a 10% drop off.
I was just going to say it was around a 10% drop, not even that. That's pretty incredible. Yeah. That's actually one of the highest holds for a second weekend hold, at least in modern movie history, from what I'm understanding.
Yeah, it's almost unprecedented. Pretty wild. And it's interesting, we're going to have a couple of reviews this week. We're going to be talking about the new Cronenberg and the new Gavin O'Connor film, The Accountant 2.
Yeah.
And when I went to see The Accountant 2 at the local AMC that I typically go to, I went on a Friday night. And while Fridays are obviously busy most of the time,
sure,
I have never seen that parking lot as full as I did when I went to see The Accountant 2. And look, I love me some Gavin O'Connor. But
they were not there to see Gavin. They were there to see Ryan.
Yeah. Like I am president of the Gavin O'Connor fan club. Okay. Like I will champion his films.
He's a type filmmaker. He's efficient.
I really like him a lot. And The Accountant 2 is fun. We'll talk about it in the review. But yeah, I would say most of the people there, not there to see Cronenberg
they were there to sin.
Yeah, exactly. They were all there to get their sinning in. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Well, good for them.
And it was very exciting. Like it was really exciting to see the place packed and presumably there to see Sinners. And it's indicative of the box office once again, because it is continuing to dominate. It's very exciting.
That's very exciting.
Very, very
Awards
exciting.
Contender, maybe. I think we're seeing the early stages of something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sinners, I'm going to be real curious about its awards push at the end of the year, because it is, by all accounts, especially given its genre, not your typical, Academy fare, but the substance broke barriers last year.
It has something that the substance also had, which was the element of surprise to add to its marketing campaign, and that could help it.
It could. It could. I'm going to be real curious, and this is going to be. It's not only got the surprise, but even more so than the substance. It has a massive box office receipt behind it. The substance did very well for the kind of movie that it was and the limited release that it had. Yeah. But it didn't do gangbusters like what we're seeing with Sinners. This is a whole different animal.
It's a very different thing. You're absolutely right.
So I'm going to be real curious. The Academy they typically don't go for horror. And I'm really hoping that this sinning vampire movie just breaks barriers once again.
Yeah, they typically
get to the
don't go
Oscars.
for these types of genre films. But you know, if Sinners can get into the headspace of the Academy members by not thinking of it as a horror film, then maybe it could do better. Because it really isn't much of a horror film when you think about it. It has horror
No, I
elements,
agree.
but there's a lot
Yeah.
more to it that I think could be palatable for members of the Academy. You know,
No,
if
yeah.
they're willing to watch it,
Yeah.
we'll simply say.
Yeah, and that's a good transition to the next segment we want to get to. But quickly, I also want to note, as far as Sinners specifically, how that goes when it comes to the end of the year. I am curious how Warner Brothers approaches it in terms of marketing, in terms of that
Sure.
campaign push. Is it going to have a Barbie-like campaign? Are they going to push it that hard? Or is it just going to be word of mouth and us doing things like this to get the voters riled up? I'm real curious because I see a world where Warner Brothers, and I don't know what else they have on their slate as far as the rest of the calendar goes.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But when we get to the fall and they have more of your conventional awards fair that they're going to pay attention to, Sinners could get lost. I could see that happening,
can see that
especially
happening.
because
Yeah.
it's a vampire film. It's a horror film. You know, to your point, not as much, but on paper, that's
Yeah,
how it'll be
it's-
viewed. And it came out in April. So like, it's probably going to need some sort of awards push to get it back into the minds of people.
It needs the audience backing. It needs that
And it will.
grassroots.
There's no
kind of
doubt
thing.
about
Yeah,
that.
and
The
if
grassroots will be there.
if that's loud enough, then maybe Warner Brothers will take notice. Like that's
Yeah.
what it needs.
We'll see. I hope that Warner Brothers, regardless of what else is on their slate, I hope that they are going to champion this.
It's a
Maybe
really
that's a
good
false
movie.
hope.
Yeah. It's well,
I don't know.
hey, it doesn't
but
change the fact that it's a really good movie and
Yeah.
one of Coogler's best as far as the 5 films he's made as a
It's great.
filmmaker.
It's really great. If Warner Brothers is smart, they are already getting the funds ready for that.
They're
push
noticing
for the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the Academy, though, and to Brendan's transition a moment ago, before we get to the main slate we have here for the show this week, I did want to bring up the Oscar news. They've been in the news a couple of times over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Most notably, and we talked about this briefly last week on the show, that they are going to have a new category for best stunt design that is coming in 2027. That is very exciting. However, they were in the news this last week because they are updating their rules. And specifically, one of the rules that was a major talking point over the last week is that they are implementing a rule which requires members to have seen the nominated films before voting in all Academy Awards categories. How on earth was that not already a rule? Like, that is
This seems like a joke.
insane.
This seriously
does,
seems like
yeah.
a joke. Hearing that news, my first reaction was, are we like in some type of made up movie directed by Christopher Guest, like Best in Show or This Is Spinal Tap or something like that, where like this just seems like a joke. Like, I can't believe this is an actual rule that has to be announced. Like,
Yeah.
you would think if you're voting for these movies, you're already obligated to watch everything that's nominated. Otherwise, does your vote even count? That's
Yeah.
just hilarious. This is just hilarious to me.
It is astonishing that they have to make this a rule. To me, this is equivalent to a parent understanding that their children are not doing their homework and are having to slap them on the wrist to get them to do their homework.
Or it's- or
they're
it's like you don't-
treating their
yeah,
members like children.
No,
That's
it's
what
like
this is.
Yeah, it's like, or you don't realize, oh, you just had a child. They're not eating on their own, so they're starving. Oh, I guess I gotta feed them.
Like it makes no sense to me. I mean, I get that we live busy lives. You're not able to see everything. That's understandable. However, you're in the academy. You are given the privilege to vote on these awards that to the individuals that do win them, there are consequences to those Oscars being handed out. And so it does matter. It does matter on that level. So when you're talking about the business of Hollywood and how a person's life may or may not change because they won an Oscar, I think taking that seriously is something you should do anyway. That's the honor of it. That's the privilege of it. They shouldn't be told to watch these movies to vote. But clearly they do need to, because a lot of people are not doing that.
Well, I think what's funniest about this news is not the fact that the Academy needed to announce it. That's already funny, as we're talking about. It's why they had to announce it, because there are many members of the Academy who very openly, almost braggadociously, announced that they refuse to watch everything. Like that makes this even funnier and almost cynically annoying at the same time too.
Yeah. But and this is where I do appreciate them implementing the rule. And I don't know if they are going to do anything to enforce the rule, but assuming that they're
at least addressing a problem by coming out and saying this.
What I like about it is that if you are not going to watch all of the movies, and as we just stated, it's understandable. We all live busy lives. Maybe you have a new film that you're working on. You don't have time to watch all of it. I get it. It's fine. We all have, busy schedules. Then you just don't get to vote. That's fine. That's it. You just don't get to vote. You don't get to participate in this year's Academy Awards. It's as simple as that. You either watch and participate or you don't. And I do love that they're drawing a line in the sand.
And I think it should be that simple. It could be as detailed and as annoyingly detailed as trying to find what films you actually qualify to vote for based on what you have seen. So maybe some categories you could fully participate in, but no one has the bandwidth to track something like that. So I think you either fully participate or you don't. I think it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. And if it takes you implementing a rule for that to happen, then that's fine. Like you said, they're addressing a problem that while we can argue the ethics of whether that should or shouldn't happen anyway, it is happening. It doesn't matter theoretically that people in the industry should be watching these films.
Yeah.
We can debate that all day. Obviously, it makes sense for them to do so. It doesn't matter, though. They're not. Simply, they're not. Your kid should be doing their homework. They should be. But, sometimes they just don't. They just don't. And you have to enforce a rule for them to do their homework. If you want to play video games, if you want dessert, you have to do your homework. I'm sorry. That's the rules. So sometimes you just got to be the parent, and that's what they're doing.
So here's what might happen here is that it might mean you have less people actually voting for these movies, but it does mean a larger percentage of those voting actually have enough research done to give a proper vote then.
Yeah.
And I feel like that speaks more to those who are actually receiving awards then.
And that, as perhaps an unintended consequence, I think is going to be really interesting to see how the winners and maybe even the nominees to some degree. Now, I think that as far as the nominee voting goes, that's up to the branch, so that's a little bit different. That's not what this rule is for. This rule is for them to watch everything that is nominated to vote on the final Oscars,
right?
Which is fine. Yeah, because again, if you're in the actors branch, what you're going to watch 500 films a year and on top of working? No, that's just not going to happen. I understand that. I'm not angry at that. That's a whole different can of worms. But when it comes to the nominees, it's already there in front of you. You have access galore to all of this. It's not that hard to get your hands on a screener if you're in the Academy.
Right.
To watch everything that is nominated for the final vote. That I don't think is asking too much. I lost my train of thought. I don't know exactly where I was going.
I'm taking a wild guess, and I think what you were about to say was that you're curious how the response is going to be based on who wins.
I'm curious
stuff.
how.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks for bringing me back in.
You're welcome. You're welcome for listening.
I'm really curious how it's going to change the winners. Like how, as far as, because like if it was the old way of doing things, does X actress, maybe she would have won, but under the new rules, and now there's not as many people voting. This actress over here is actually going to win now. Yeah,
like how is it going to change as far as who's going to win awards based on who had the strongest marketing campaign? Like there are instances where I feel like people have won just given the narrative or the marketing campaigns backing them, which doesn't always it doesn't always require someone to do as much actual research for what they're voting for. They can simply respond to what the narrative is, and then that's how they'll vote. But in this case,
how does, and sorry to butt in real fast, but on that point, how does the narrative change now? Do marketers approach this differently? Because
they might have to.
Now you are marketing to people that have to watch it.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of, well, they might not watch the substance, but we can pull them in based off this narrative.
Yeah,
that's
a great point.
No longer a thing anymore.
The marketing might have to change. It might have to change its narrative a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. To people, because now you're marketing to people that have to watch it. They have to see it. So maybe it gets a little bit more specific. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see the side effects of all of this.
I do wonder how the marketing will change now that I think about it, given the way that you said that. I feel like the marketing is going to be a bit tamer as opposed to previous years because they don't really know how to target these people just yet. It might take some years to be able to solidify how they're going about targeting these individuals who actually do have to vote. So yeah, we'll see. But I do think this is a good thing. It absolutely is a good thing because it demonstrates that those who are receiving awards now are being voted on based on those who actually saw the work that they did.
Yeah.
As opposed to just what they're responding to politically or narratively.
Exactly. And I'm going to be really curious, really excited to see where that goes. The last thing I want to bring up, and then we'll move on. One of the other rules that they are implementing is in regards to AI. What's so fascinating to me about this is that it proves to me that the leadership within the Academy, they are avid NHL fans. They follow the NHL very closely.
I mean,
because
everyone's an NHL fan, according to you.
Well, here, look, I'm going to get specific here. I have a reason to bring this up. I have a reason. What they did as far as the rule in regards to AI is very, very much out of the playbook of Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL. It is a page right out of his playbook. Out of his playbook. Gary Bettman by trade is a lawyer, which is why marketing for the NHL has sucked for decades because he is a lawyer. He doesn't care about expanding or growing the game. He makes everything into a court drama. And what they've done, what the Academy has done here is very, very similar to what the NHL does. Now, here's what the NHL does for context and me getting to my point here. There are a lot of rules within the NHL where it is written so vaguely that it's hard to determine what the rule actually means. And the NHL does this on purpose so that way when something happens, Gary Bettman can essentially dictate that he can dictate a decision just based on what he thinks is right in the moment. He doesn't want anything to be black and white so that the way they're set in stone. So if something happens over here, but he wants to sway over here, he doesn't want to be stuck. He wants everything to be vague so that way he can just go wherever he wants depending on the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That is exactly what the Oscars are doing in regards to this new AI rule. They are essentially saying,
That's a good point.
the Academy, each branch, you get to judge this. We're not going to define what is appropriate as far as generative AI and other digital tools and how that helps or hurts a movie in relation to the Oscars. You get to decide. We're not going to set in stone what is good and what is bad. So that way, when the next Brutalist comes up, we can just treat it individually and then move on. And then the next one will come up and we treat that individually and then we move on. And it's going to set, or it's going to make it so you can't set a precedent, which is, again, the NHL playbook. Like that is right out of the Gary Bettman playbook. This is how you do it. And
I can see it.
You cannot convince me that they did not approach Gary Bettman
as some type of consultant or something.
Yes, the same consultant. Because my God, it is so very much the NHL for the Academy to do this.
It only proves once again that movies are sports. Movie awards are sports.
Yeah.
So it's all sports.
Yeah. When the commissioners of the NHL and the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NFL, when they get together and they do have parties, because they've talked about this before, where the commissioners of those four major sports, they'll get together. They are now bringing in the president of the Academy as well. It's going to be the five of them. The five of them are going to.
It's a very, I guess, the Academy Awards, any awards body now for movies. It's a very different form of athleticism now. But we have to, we have to start to accept it as athleticism in its own way.
But that's essentially what they've done here. They have laid the groundwork so that way there's no precedent. They can just treat each film, and maybe that is the best route to go. All joking aside, I'm obviously having a lot of fun by bringing up that comparison.
No, but it allows them to look at movies on a case by case basis more easily.
Yeah.
I feel
absolutely. And I don't necessarily hate that because, again, the Brutalist as an example, there was a lot of hoopla around it. When you really get down to the nitty gritty of it all, absolute nonsense for that to be controversial at all.
Yeah.
It was nonsense. There was no generative AI used for that film. They were digital tools used to make that movie what it was.
It didn't take away anyone's job. It allowed them to enhance the utilization of their respective jobs. So people still got paid for the work they did for that film. It wasn't a masking of artistic intent, as we often worry about. It's a very different agenda with a very different end goal.
Exactly.
And this allows them to do their proper analysis to determine what those end goals are.
Exactly. And that's why I understand you don't want there to just be precedent and that's what you go on no matter what. Because if there was a precedent set beforehand and the Brutalist fell into some sort of trap, it wouldn't have been fair to the Brutalist given what we know to be true about that film in regards to AI. It wouldn't have that would have been a little too chaotic. That would have been nonsensical. Right. This, at least, it does give them flexibility to make the right decision based on the film individually. Yeah. So again, all joking aside, I'm mostly just having fun there. But
I like the analogy you're making, though. I do. I think it more clearly explains how this will be looked upon as a case by case basis.
Yeah.
Because as much as we don't like the utilization of AI in movies in general, that doesn't necessarily mean some utilization of it as a tool. In the case of the Brutalist, it's not the same thing as maybe a movie that completely utilizes it by taking away an artist's job. Like that's a very, very different conversation. And I think they should judge differently.
I agree. All right. With all of that said, let's go ahead and move on. We are going to round out the 1960s with our Best Picture movie series, as we'll get to Midnight Cowboy here in just a little bit. And then we'll take a pause on this movie series for a little while, and we'll come back to it at another time as we'll tackle another decade. So I do look forward to getting into Midnight Cowboy. Before we do, though, as we talked about before we got into our Sinners conversation, the summer movie season is upon us.
Yeah.
And so we are going to do a summer movie preview here and talk about some movies that are coming out this summer that we're really excited for, and perhaps some films that you may want to get on your radar if they're not already. I do want to start here, and this isn't like these aren't hidden gems by any stretch of the imagination. I want to start big. I want to go big.
Oh,
as
you're going to
far as
start
the
big.
summer
Okay,
movie season.
this is not a JD thing to do. So I'm curious
No,
where you're going.
We're
with
going to go
this.
big here. And the reason I want to go big here is because, and for those that listened to last week's show, Brendan and I got into this a little bit at the very end, at the very, very end of the show. But I want to bring it up here again in case you didn't listen to last week's show. I want to bring this up because there's been a bit of a switcheroo as far as my anticipation goes.
Oh,
And it sounds
I know
like
where you're going
yours
with this.
as well,
Okay.
Brendan.
Yeah, I know you're going with
When
this.
we did our yearly preview back in January, there were 2 Marvel movies on our radar. One of them I was very excited for, and the other I thought was going to be another Suicide Squad. I was really looking forward to Fantastic Four. I thought that one had great potential. At that time, we hadn't seen any trailers, we hadn't seen any marketing, but simply what we knew about the project. And we talked about how there was a lot at stake for the Fantastic Four. All we really knew about that film, aside from the cast, we got the logo last year and we got a glimpse at the score from Michael J. Giacchino.
Right.
So a lot to look forward to. Thunderbolts, on the other hand, now I've been looking forward to Thunderbolts personally for a couple of years now because I think it's a fun storyline in the comics. And they have set up all of these characters in all of these various movies. But generally, that was a film that was dismissed for the longest time. And so I felt a need to somewhat champion it because it was being dismissed. I thought there was potential. But at the same time, I didn't think that the film was going to amount to anything great, where Fantastic Four was looking promising at that time. Now, fast forward a few months where we've gotten so much more marketing for both films, really. And while I still am hopeful for Fantastic Four, my goodness, my excitement level for Thunderbolts has skyrocketed.
I think there has been a bit of a reversal here. I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you on this one. Thunderbolts, I had very little expectation for, and I've had very little expectation for most Marvel movies for the past maybe year or year and a half or so. I will say, with regard to Fantastic Four specifically, I don't think it was necessarily anticipation for that movie. It was more so a recognition that if there's one movie Marvel needs to be successful, it's that one. Like, that's the one that's almost obligated to be a good movie and a successful one. And I still stand by, given where it seems like Marvel's going, that is the movie that still needs to be their biggest hit, whether it be critically or not, but at least box office wise and given the audience response, that needs to be their biggest movie. I feel like it really does. But man, the hype around Thunderbolts has surprisingly increased to the point that maybe a reversal has kind of happened. I'm someone that wasn't fully sold on all of the marketing for Thunderbolts. Like, that A24 themed trailer was whatever. It was kind of funny. Like, I kind of saw it as more joke than anything else.
Yeah, it was humorous. I don't think it was taking itself all that seriously.
No, for sure. And I kind of respect that. But man, some of the latest pieces of marketing they've released, the movie looks like a movie. Like, it actually looks like a movie. It looks well shot. It looks well made. It looks tangible. It looks choreographed. It looks put together, which I can't say about most of their movies over the past 2 years or so. And that's awesome. That's kind of awesome to see.
Yeah, and I think the irony to that even is that back in February, we also got Captain America: Brave New World. And there was some discourse around that film going back to the phase 2 formula. And I think it's fair to say it didn't really.
It didn't.
A little bit.
I didn't hate that movie as much as most people did. I was very mixed
Yeah.
on it, but it is a movie that felt like it was held together by Scotch tape.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I don't think it all the way had the phase 2 aesthetic and
No.
feel to it.
No.
I do appreciate that. Again, we've moved away from the cosmic and it was more grounded. And perhaps you could say phase 1, phase 2 with how it's essentially a sequel to The Incredible
I mean,
Hulk.
it's kind of a high level way of throwing it back to phase 2, but
Yeah.
the pacing of it all and the way it feels constructed feels very phase 5 in a way as well.
I agree. I agree. Like there is somewhat of I use this term very loosely, but very loosely, but kind of, again, it's a little bit more grounded. We've moved away from the cosmic and the multiverse, right? It's everything on Earth. I do appreciate that about the film, especially given that we're exploring a new Captain America and what that means. But aesthetically, in terms of its broadness, very much phase 5. I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
I don't think it all the way got there. Thunderbolts, on the other hand, I don't think that's a film that is trying to go for a phase 2 aesthetic necessarily, but man, my goodness, that it is a film that feels like a movie in a way that I don't know if we've had since phase 2 almost a decade ago, which is really exciting. Now, there's of course going to be larger MCU elements at play that will revert against that. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But the marketing has done a great job of hiding that and just making the movie feel like a more brooding version of Suicide Squad or Guardians of the Galaxy. And there's certainly going to be a similar dynamic at play, but tonally, it does seem to be, in the end, it looks like it's going to be quite the departure from Guardians, which I am excited for.
It looks like they're marketing a movie and not a Marvel movie, which is a big difference. In the case of Fantastic Four, which I will say, just given the marketing we've seen so far for that film, it certainly looks more cinematic than most of what we've gotten in phase 5 and even most of phase 4.
Yeah.
But it looks like we're still getting mostly a Marvel movie with that one as opposed to a movie. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I just didn't really expect to have these types of expectations for Thunderbolts, which I thought was just going to be yet another throwaway thing for them. I felt like that was going to be something that they just felt obligated to complete because they announced it so long ago. But it actually feels like a tangible effort. Like it actually feels like a cinematic treat. And maybe Fantastic Four will also be that as well. And I'm hopeful that it is. But I'm surprised that of the two, the one I have the most faith in feeling more cinematic is actually Thunderbolts, which I did not expect to.
Yeah, I mean, I still have a lot of hope and excitement for Fantastic Four. I love the 60s aesthetic and vibe that it has.
I like the retro vibe.
Tonally, I do think the films will be very similar with how dire things get. And I do love that juxtaposition in the Fantastic Four trailer. That film is going to end on a massive disaster, and it's going to break everyone's hearts. And I look forward to that. And we'll discuss whether that's effective or not once we get to July. But what's exciting about Thunderbolts is that it had a lot of work to do to get to where it is now, in terms of at least my personal anticipation for it.
And it did the job. It did the job.
Yeah, it very much did the job. Again, from a broad perspective, I feel like I've been looking forward to the film in some time, but I was like, my expectations were still kind of low as far as overall quality goes.
Yeah. It was more of a curiosity for me.
Yeah.
And then it became something I was actually kind of excited about, which I did not expect.
So I'm very much looking forward to Thunder. Like, in the end, by the time we get to the end of July and we had seen both films, like I think we're going to live in a world where Thunderbolts is the better of all the three movies that come out this year, and I would not have said that back in January.
Oh, I'm fully anticipating Thunderbolts is going to be the better of the three. I really do. I really, and
Yeah.
and that's not to say that I think Fantastic Four: First Steps will be a bad movie. I have a hunch, regardless of where I fall on that film, it's going to be better than most, if not all, of what we got in Phase 5, minus Thunderbolts.
Yeah.
I feel like these two are going to be in a different stratosphere when compared to the rapid content creation that we've been getting from Marvel.
Mhm.
As if to suggest that Marvel is finally recognizing the faults in this strategy and are going to tone things back a bit, which we might start to see as we get to the conclusion of both Doomsday and Secret Wars, that maybe this is all about taking things back a little bit, recalibrating. I feel like all of these final movies in phases 5 and 6 are going to be all about recalibration.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the theme here.
And if those two movies land, Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, it would do the MCU an incredible favor.
Yeah.
Because just a few months ago, we were sitting here going, how on earth is Avengers Doomsday going to bring back that large MCU excitement that you got with Endgame, given that everyone seems to be pretty lukewarm at best on Phase 4? There's been no buildup really to Doomsday. There is a lot riding on these two movies, especially since Captain America that came out didn't really move the needle all that much. And now the marketing for these two films have gotten people excited. The Doomsday casting was a massive success, as we talked about some weeks ago. If these two films land overnight, the reputation of the MCU could reshift once again. There's a lot riding on these two movies.
I hope so. I just hope they make movies
look good.
again. And it sounds like they're trying to keep things a bit more self-contained once again, which is, I think, what they need. They need to kind of go in the opposite direction that they've been focusing on, which has been, epic world building and epic expansion. Maybe that's not the way to go anymore. I think you've reached a breaking point, Marvel, and they're recognizing that.
It's going to be exciting. I'm going to be real curious. Thunderbolts comes out this coming weekend. In fact, by the time this episode is released, there is a great chance that you are listening to this as I'm in the theater watching Thunderbolts. So hopefully it's good.
You're getting to see it
Hopefully
early.
I'm having the time of my life.
Are you bringing your son with you on that one?
I don't think so. Schedule wise, I don't think it's going to work out. So I
okay.
think I'm going to unfortunately have to see that by myself.
Okay.
But we will of course get the Thunderbolts very, very soon. Fantastic Four: First Steps comes out July 25th. Where do you want to go from there?
That is a great question,
Where should we
JD.
go?
Where do we want to go from here? Do we want to keep talking big, or we could? I guess I have to be. Well, I guess I have to be a bit upfront because there are a lot of big movies coming out here in the summer, and the majority of them I wouldn't say I'm all that excited about. I think I have a lot of curiosity about a lot of these movies, but I wouldn't say I'm all that excited about a lot of these. I do want to get one out of the way because a lot of people might be listening to me say that for long time listeners of the show and thinking, how the heck am I not excited about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning?
Yeah.
And the reason why is because I was completely fooled by Dead Reckoning, which I did not care for at all. Like, that's the only Mission Impossible film I actively don't like. And because this is a direct tie to that previous film, I'm very concerned about where this one's going to go. I think it looks better than that previous film, but there's a lot coming out this summer that I think should be building more hype in someone like me. But I've been burned so many times by many of these other franchises or many of these other types of movies that I'm getting too concerned. I'm getting too cynical. And I bring up Mission Impossible as maybe the biggest example of why that is. And I really hope I'm fooled. I really hope that I'm proven wrong. I don't know. I feel like the precedent that Dead Reckoning set, for me at least, is not boding well for where this franchise is going to go and ultimately conclude if this is the end point. I'm worried. I'm really worried about this one.
I am curious. I don't know if I'm worried, but I'm certainly curious. And I am with you to reiterate for anyone listening that did not hear our review of Dead Reckoning last year. My thoughts on that film, if I'm going to be kind, are incomplete at this point. There are aspects to Dead Reckoning I like. There are aspects to it that I am very much baffled by. But we are only halfway through the story. The Final Reckoning is clearly a part 2, and it very much could answer the questions that I have as a result of Dead Reckoning. So I don't want to sit here and say this is my stamp of approval on the film, because I don't really have any conclusive thoughts on Dead Reckoning yet. Now, by the time we get to the Final Reckoning, even if that film comes out, it's great, I really love it, it still might not answer all of the questions I have on Dead Reckoning. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be something that we revisit once the film comes out.
Yeah.
But at this point, Dead Reckoning did leave me very much mixed. Very much mixed. So I am waiting for the Final Reckoning, and maybe that is the word that I can use to describe it. I'm sitting here waiting. I
am too.
I'm not worried. It actually looks great.
Oh yeah, visually it looks
better.
better. Yeah, it does. It doesn't look like a cartoon like that first movie did.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think visually it is much more in line with the rest of the series. Tom Cruise doing Tom Cruise things. It looks really great on that front as well. I just have a lot of questions regarding the story, the film's use of artificial intelligence. Where does that go? Because where things left off in Dead Reckoning, I did find it honestly incredibly vacuous. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to fully judge anything until we get to Final Reckoning.
Yeah,
because
that's fair. That's fair.
The ending of a film can oftentimes recontextualize how you feel about what came beforehand.
Especially, I mean, this was intended as a part 1 and part 2 situation. It kind of got morphed to not be that anymore, but it doesn't change the fact that Dead Reckoning is very much a prelude to what we're getting here. They are very much intertwined, and that is very much going to be the point. So, yeah, you're right. There is a lot that could happen in the Final Reckoning that shifts our perspective of Dead Reckoning. I'm only worried. I actually gave Dead Reckoning a revisit not too long ago, and I liked it a lot less on a rewatch.
Okay. I haven't revisited Dead Reckoning quite yet. I've been going through them, and I have a few more weeks before I get to the Final Reckoning.
Franchise. It's an awesome franchise nonetheless, though.
It's a great franchise. I've I've revisited the first 3 already, so I will probably get to Dead Reckoning here in the next week or so. And we'll see if anything changes. I don't know, because so many questions or criticisms I have of that film, it just leads
they're
to
dangling. They're all dangling there.
It just leads to that path of uncertainty, inconclusiveness. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to wait. I am going to revisit Dead Reckoning, obviously, so it's fresh on my mind going into Final, but we'll see. As it states right now, even on Letterboxd, they don't have a ranking for it. It feels disingenuous for me personally to do so, because I don't know. I honestly don't know.
That's fair. It is my least favorite film in the franchise very easily, but I am willing to acknowledge that could change depending on where the Final Reckoning goes. Like I just know it's my least favorite at this point. It may not stay there though.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And I may end up being with you once we see Final Reckoning. Yeah. Because there's a lot about the film I don't love currently as it stands. And as I just noted, I've already revisited the first 3. Mission Impossible 2, I am coming around on that film the more and more that I see it. I think there's
That
a lot
movie
to
is-
appreciate.
Again, maybe something will happen in the final reckoning that helps bring that movie back into the franchise more conclusively, I'll simply say, but that is clearly the narrative outlier in the franchise. Like it's the one movie in the franchise I feel like you can skip and actually get a better consistent story of where Ethan Hunt's journey leads you to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is the movie that helped redefine the stunts of where this movie was going. Like
Oh,
in a
yeah,
way,
yeah.
Mission Impossible
love-
2,
yeah.
I kind of like that movie, if I'm being perfectly
Oh, I do
honest.
too. I've really come around on it. It's been a few years since I've seen it, and I've never been the biggest fan of it, but I am starting to come around on it more. And it's even beyond the stunts of it all, and I know that gets a lot of play on social media. Just how incredible that film is as an it embraces.
Oh yeah,
its
it helped
late 90s,
define.
early 2000s aesthetic.
It did help define the stunt design aspect of this franchise going forward. But
For
you're right.
sure.
It was every 11-year-old boy's favorite movie when it first came
Yeah.
out.
And I get that. Like there's a lot of John Woo isms in the film that get a lot of play on social media.
The Mission Impossible theme song was performed by Limp Bizkit. Like that just goes
Yeah.
to show the kind of movie that it is.
Crazy. But on this rewatch, I think even beyond that, it's just the sexual tension between Tom Cruise and Thandie Newton that
Oh, it's good.
struck a
It's
chord with me.
good.
Like that's incredible. Which is why if I am going to criticize the film, it is such a striking outlier given the rest of this series, and especially where Mission Impossible 3 goes. And
Oh yeah.
that is my favorite of them. I did get a chance to revisit 3 as well. That freaking rules. No one could ever make me hate that film.
No.
love it.
It's-
I don't care how bad people talk about it. You can rank it last on your list all you want. I don't care. It is the best of them, and I will die on that hill.
I love that passion. I really do. I don't fully agree with you, but I do like Mission Impossible 3. Yet at the same time, it proves this point that Mission Impossible is one of those franchises that there's not really much of a consensus, right?
Yeah, you can go in any direction.
Kind of
Yeah.
love that. Like it's,
Yeah.
I mean, if maybe Fallout is the most commonly cited favorite of the bunch, but I don't even know if that's necessarily true. I feel like it is pretty varied based on how
Yeah.
people respond to this franchise.
And I love Fallout as well. That's probably my number 2.
Okay.
And look, again, going back to the point I was trying to make, I just find it incredibly jarring when you go from what is at the core, at the beating heart of Mission Impossible 2 between Cruise and Thandie Newton to him being married at the beginning of 3 and zero context to explain any of that. Which
that's
is
why, yeah.
hilarious.
I've often said I think the Mission Impossible franchise has more consistent continuity if you completely take away Mission Impossible 2 and then rename Mission Impossible 3
Yeah.
to some other name. Like, I don't know, Mission Impossible, the Anti-God or something like that, which is the
Yeah.
code they use for the Rabbit's Foot. So it actually has more of a
Yeah.
narrative continuity with the rest of the franchise. It does
Yeah.
smoothen out the entire franchise a bit more, but I still love the existence of Mission
Yeah.
Impossible 2.
Oh,
I wouldn't
same.
have it any other way.
Same. Like I really like it. I could just use my imagination, I guess, to make up that gap. It's just really funny. I say that very complimentary, don't get me wrong, but it is super jarring going from 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And but that is certainly the fun of the franchise. But I do like narratively there's at least a little bit more consistency, especially once you get to Fallout. But that is to say, at this point, I probably prefer to Dead Reckoning, but I can't say that conclusively. When we get to the final reckoning and it answers the questions that I have, it may completely flip how I feel about Dead Reckoning, and who knows, maybe it'll end up in my top 3. I don't know.
We'll see.
I have to wait and see. I have to wait.
It comes out in less than a month as we're recording this.
Yeah, so Mission Impossible certainly
That's a
wanted
biggie. That's a biggie.
to bring that one up. It is interesting though, to your point in at the beginning of your sentiments there about Mission Impossible and how your excitement level on the whole is maybe a little tamer than a lot of other summers comparatively.
Yeah.
And I am with you. Generally speaking, I am now, as of now, really looking forward to Thunderbolts. I was not feeling that a few months ago.
I'm more looking
But-
forward to that one than most of the other summer fare that we're getting, though.
Well, that's ultimately what I'm trying to bring up here. I
Yeah.
did not expect to utter that phrase
Neither
a few
did
months
I.
ago, but I think Thunderbolts, which is kicking off the summer, that might be it as far as big blockbuster fare goes. I am
Yeah.
looking forward to Mission Impossible, as we just talked about. More so than you, I am looking forward to Jurassic World Rebirth. But generally, the Jurassic World movies have not moved the needle for me at all. So I have some hopes up for Jurassic World Rebirth. We've debated this. I don't want to.
Yeah. Let's not get into the trailer
Yeah.
talk that we did before.
I'm not trying
Let's
to
just
bring
say
that
we-
up again.
JD and I don't agree based on the marketing that we've seen thus far. We'll simply
Yes.
say that.
I will just simply reiterate that I think it looks like a movie. It looks great. I am hopeful, but the franchise on the whole has left a lot to be desired. So, while there is appeal to it in a vacuum for me, it's a little bit of, I guess, how I felt about Thunderbolts 6 months ago. Sure, yeah, Thunderbolt sounds great, but the MCU right
It hasn't done the work to bring you in. And
Yes.
and I'm the opposite as far as the marketing. I think the movie looks visually not good at all. But we don't have to spend time talking about that. I'm not sold on where this franchise is going, and this one hasn't brought my hopes up at all. But I hope I'm proven wrong. I'll simply say I hope Gareth Edwards can really prove me wrong, because in the past he has been able to prove me wrong in certain cases.
Well, and that's the other element of it where I find myself mixed, because while the marketing has worked for me, the franchise keeps me at a distance, as I noted, but also even with Gareth Edwards, I love his films visually, but I don't think he's the greatest storyteller. And so, is it going to be another one of those visually alluring movies that is hollow at its core?
Well,
I don't know. Like, that's also in the back of my mind. So as much as I want to get excited for Rebirth, and I see the trailers, and I see my son get giddy, and I get excited, and we start talking about it, it's a little bit of, it's the opposite. I feel the opposite of The Godfather 3. I start to get pulled in, and then I just remember all those other things, and it just pulls me right back out.
I'll tell you how they start pulling me in, and I'm not saying the marketing has to do this, but the movie has to prove that it's going to do this. Is that they need to prove to me that this is going to be from the writer of Black Bag. Because it's David Koepp. Yeah, if they can emulate the David Koepp-isms, and especially the David Koepp-isms that we saw earlier this year with Black Bag, then I'll start to get pulled in. Because he can be a pretty efficient screenwriter, and he wrote the original Jurassic Park, and that's clearly what they're trying to pull from here. They're trying to go back to their roots, which I'm not quite seeing yet based on this marketing. But if they can showcase that to me, then I'll start to maybe have a Thunderbolts-like reaction to this one. Yeah. And maybe they can have that sort of turn of the leaf in the next few months.
The getting back to the Jurassic Park roots, I think is like, I don't know where that's coming from. I understand that might be some of the marketing. It could be the discourse. I don't know. But when I watch that trailer, it doesn't feel like Jurassic Park to me at all. It's very much Jurassic World in that we've expanded far beyond the park. They're going back to the island to collect this DNA. So maybe there's a little bit of Jurassic Park 3 thing going on there.
Which I don't hate. I kind of like Jurassic Park 3, if I'm being honest.
Do too. Yeah, I do too. So there's a little bit of that going on, but it's also Jurassic World in the sense that a lot of the dinosaurs that they're trying to collect DNA from are these hybrid dinosaurs. So it's not Jurassic Park in that sense either. Like it is very much Jurassic World and expanding the scope in that way. So I don't know. Like I don't think this is going to be going back to its roots at all. I don't think that's the case at all. And I don't see that in the trailer.
I don't
but
either.
To your point about David Koepp, he is a screenwriter I do like. Obviously, he's done well in this franchise before, but even with something like Black Bag, which is so very different, he's just a good writer when he is passionate and he's feeling confident. Hopefully, that is the case here. Hopefully,
I hope
that is
so.
the case.
It almost seems as though when they first greenlit Jurassic World back in, I mean, I don't know when they greenlit it, but the first film, Jurassic World, came out in 2015. That was 10 years ago. Now that we say that, that's ridiculous. I can't believe it was 10 years ago.
A decade.
I wouldn't be surprised if they had two avenues. They had that Jurassic World movie, and then they had whatever this one was. And apparently they chose the wrong one, them being Universal. And maybe this movie is like, oh, crap, we have to course correct this because that trilogy clearly did not work. So, yeah, so it's like we still have this one in our back pocket. Let's just do a new Jurassic World movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Since we're running kind of low on time, I just want to rapid fire go through some of these. How to Train Your Dragon. We've been pretty open on this. We're not looking forward to that one at all. Superman. It's James Gunn. I'm feeling kind of meh on it as well, but we'll see. I fingers crossed. I know he's restarting the DCU, revitalizing that. I'm hoping that he brings his Guardians of the Galaxy energy to the DCU. But
Not
we'll
his
see.
Suicide Squad energy.
Not his Suicide Squad energy. I did not like that film at all, but we'll see. We'll see. I'll keep an open mind on it. Obviously, Ballerina looks good. I'm intrigued, curious.
Each trailer is slowly more revealing as to a potentially good movie to me, so I'll give it that. But I'm still a little apprehensive about that one.
Okay. 28 years later. How are you feeling about 28 years later?
Now that one I'm looking forward to. That one I'm looking forward to. And again, maybe it just comes down to good marketing, but the fact that it has more of a smallness to it, a tangibility to it, I that's maybe the thing that I'm latching on to. If there's a theme to what I'm looking forward to this summer, it's the movies that look and feel the most like movies to me, and not necessarily IP related content. Which might be a very cynical thing to say, but even some of these smaller films that we're getting that are very sequel-esque, like 28 Years Later, as you mentioned, that still feels like a movie. Like that's still that's one of the ones I'm looking forward to most. And I guess to tie it to that, even though this is a very different example, out of all of these summer movies we're getting, like between Superman, Jurassic World, even to an extent Mission Impossible, I'm more excited for Final Destination Bloodlines, if I'm being honest. Because
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I didn't want to move away from 28 Years Later since
I'm just making like the comparison, like the smaller horror films that feel more tangible is what I'm looking forward to, and that's just another example of that.
Yeah, for sure. Bloodlines, I guess, just to speak on that real fast, I don't have any sort of anticipation for because those movies have never been my jam. They've never really been my thing.
I like those movies. So they're more for me than they are for you, I guess.
Yeah. So just a purely a subjective thing. That's really all that it is. I've never really liked them. I've found them mostly boring.
Okay.
And it's so predictable.
Okay.
Despite the quote unquote twist that often occur in them.
I think they're ridiculously fun, but I get it.
They are ridiculous. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to downplay the diverting qualities of them. They just haven't been for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
Bloodlines.
fair.
Again, I just find it funny that we can't just have another one of those movies. We got to tie it back to, the bloodline of it all. Like it just, which I guess kind of makes sense for that.
It's honestly so silly, just in
era that
concept.
we're
I
in
kind
now.
of love that. Yeah. But anyway, I guess back to 28 Years Later, like that's a that's a movie I am very much looking forward to. Like it actually just has like a tangible edge to it that most of these other movies don't have. And it feels visceral. It feels like it's really going for something. Like there's a boldness to it that, again, maybe the movie doesn't quite match, but it seems to be marketing some type of boldness that I really can't wait to see. And that one I am looking forward to more than many of these others.
Yeah. 28 years later is interesting to me because when you look at Danny Boyle's filmography, it is really hard to pin this man down.
Oh, I'm not the biggest fan of him, if I'm being honest.
I'm not either, but I do love how eclectic he is. He's a little bit all over the place. Obviously, he did 28 Days Later, but in between that film and 28 Years Later, you have something like Millions, which I really love. There's Sunshine, which is, so outlandish and bombastic.
Hey, it's bizarre. It's out. Yeah, you're right. It's outlandish. I respect the fact that he made that.
I know. I love the ambition. And then he follows that up with Slumdog Millionaire, like this Oscar movie. Like, and then
which I don't love.
Hours. Yeah, I don't love that either. 127 Hours is great, though. That's really good. But again, a very different movie.
Danny Boyle is at his best when his movies have a bit of a grossness to them. And almost like this like griminess to them, and 127 Hours has it. 28 Days Later absolutely has it. Sunshine
Trainspotting for sure.
Trainspotting, absolutely has it. And even a movie like Steve Jobs doesn't really have it, but there's a thrilling quality to that movie, mostly given Aaron Sorkin. Yeah, I think Aaron Sorkin's script does a lot of the heavy lifting for that one, which is not a bad thing. It just makes it a very entertaining movie, narratively speaking. But I think Danny Boyle does a great job showcasing some restraint for that material. But when he taps into movies like, what was it, Yesterday? That Beatles fantasy movie, which is still, it's so bad. It is so bad.
I don't love Yesterday. And that was the last film he made. That was 2019. So it's been 6 years since we've seen Danny Boyle on the scene. And then 2 years before that was T2 Trainspotting, which I think is a fascinating mixture.
I gotta say,
I don't think it's great, but I kind of love where it goes.
That's a film that's lingered for me. I didn't love it when we first reviewed it, but I'm kind of intrigued to give that one a rewatch. I feel like I'm gonna like that one more and more as I think about it.
Yeah, which is to say, I'm really looking forward to 28 Years Later because Danny Boyle is, I feel like you just never know what you're going to get with him, but he's working together with Alex Garland, of course, Garland writing the screenplay once again here. Yeah. So them coming together, they both produced this film as well. I think it has a lot of potential, honestly.
It feels like a passion project. It feels like an artist project.
Yes. You couple that with everything you're saying about its aesthetics and tone and how it looks. And there's a lot to be excited for 28 Years Later, for sure. Okay. So we talked about Bloodlines. We talked about 28 Years Later. I think as far as all of the big films, I mean, we've hit most of them. I Know What You Did Last Summer. I don't know if you have any sort of expectations for that.
I'm looking forward to that one more than most of these other big blockbusters that we talked about.
Okay. Totally fair. A Naked Gun, take it or leave it. I don't think I have too much.
Yeah, I don't have much to say other than the trailer made me laugh. It made me laugh. And I like those old movies with Leslie Nielsen.
Okay. And then there's the Pixar film Elio, which actually I believe comes out the same weekend as 28 Years Later, if I'm not mistaken. So
it does, and I always have high hopes for a Pixar movie that's not based on one of their previous movies, so one that's not a sequel.
And look, take advantage because this might be the last original Pixar film we ever get.
You know what? I'm gonna say this. Okay. I don't care if the movie is horrible. I want it to do well at the box office. Because I don't want that to mean we get more Toy Story 5s because of it.
We need we need that film to succeed, but at the same time, they're going to take the wrong lesson if that film does. We're going to get an Elio 2 in 3 years, and
we're going to get a Ratatouille. We're going to get a Ratatouille at some point soon.
I mean, hopefully, obviously we want that film to do well, so they take the lesson a way of do more original films. I'm not
I
that
don't.
optimistic when it comes to
Hey,
executives at Hollywood.
I'll say this about Pixar's latest output when it comes to original films, even if they haven't done that well at the box office, and a lot of that was mostly due to pandemic related shutdowns. But Luca surprised me, absolutely surprised me. One of their best movies, if you ask me. Turning Red, I think, was even better than most maybe anticipated to be. And I didn't love Soul, but at least it had a level of ambition to it. You know, it at least tried for some things. So if there is any track record to compare Elio to, it has a pretty good, track record to compare it to. So hopefully that means the movie will surprise us. That's all I'll simply say.
And I hope that it does. But again, circling it back to what Hollywood will take away from all of this, we live in an era where Seth Rogen's The Studio is a documentary, not a satire. That film has become insanely prescient. Insanely prescient.
Naughty Kool-Aid.
I just cannot believe some of the news that we've gotten lately.
Oh, and as someone that lives only an hour and a half away from Hershey, Pennsylvania, and the news of a Hershey movie happening, it just speaks so much. There's so many volumes ridiculous. To speak to there.
It's so ridiculous. So yeah, look, if that's the era that we're living in, I don't have any faith in any executive with the major studio. But who knows? Maybe you're right. Maybe those films will do well and they will surprise us with what they take away. I do want to note though, while the trailer surprised me in the sense that it's different than what I expected, I'm still looking forward to Materialist. That's still one of my favorite, or one of my most anticipated films of the year, I should say. And then Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme comes out in June, I believe. And
that looks awesome. June 6th, I think, is when it goes wide.
June 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cannot wait. Cannot wait. Wes Anderson seems to be tapping into what I love about him lately, and I will die on the hill. Yeah, that he is working at a very, very different level than he's ever done before. Yeah, at least since the Royal Tenenbaums, and how he's going to follow his recent work, his recent output up with The Phoenician Scheme. Very, very much looking forward to that as well. Yep. And then I also have to mention, because the same week that film expands, The Phoenician Scheme, is The Life of Chuck, and it's probably. I don't want to discount any time that we've had.
It looks like a JD movie.
It looks like a JD movie. I'm very excited for Alex and the pull quote that we got for.
Oh yeah, that was
trailer.
Amazing.
It was very, very cool. I'm very excited for Alex. But the trailer on its own terms, even away from that, looks like a JD film through and through. I think it's going to absolutely kill me. So I cannot wait. I am really looking forward to that film. And look, it won TIFF last year. I don't know what that means as far as its Oscar chances go. It is interesting that Neon decided to wait to this year to release that film instead of putting it out last year in the awards race last year. I'm curious if they've spoken to that decision. I don't know if they have or not, but they're putting it out also in the summer, in the early parts of the summer.
Yeah.
So does that affect its Oscar chances at all? I don't know, but I know we talked about this a few years ago. It's very rare in this era for the TIFF winner to miss out on a nomination for Best Picture. And this is a year where TIFF could have two, right? Because you also have this year's TIFF. Whatever film wins there, does Life of Chuck and that film both go?
I think the Academy is killing to give a Stephen King adaptation an Oscar. I really think they are.
I mean, the response for The Life of Chuck has been pretty, people have really talked up that film a lot.
It seems so, yeah. I know the Metacritic score at this point now is not as high as that reaction seems to suggest, but I know it has enough legs for those who do love it to maybe really push it forward. Yeah. So I know it certainly has its fans already. I think that'll be enough. That is definitely one I am looking forward to when compared to some of these others we talked about. If I were to do a quick wrap up here and maybe pick, I don't know, 3 movies for this summer that I think I'm most looking forward to, a lot of them would fall more into the smaller film category.
Yeah.
Movies like Hurry Up Tomorrow, the new film from Trey Edward Schultz with The Weeknd and Jenna Ortega, looks really intriguing. There's the horror romance movie Together with Dave Franco and Allison Brie.
Yep,
Looks
looking forward to that
absolutely
one, too.
amazing.
Yep.
And maybe if I were to pick a third one, I don't know. Maybe that would be Materialists. Maybe 28 Years Later. Maybe The Phoenician Scheme. Some of these other ones we talked about. Heck, I'm looking forward to Happy Gilmore too. Sue me. I'm looking forward to that one.
Okay.
Weirdly, I think I'm looking forward to that one more than any of these other big movies that we already alluded to, like Superman or Jurassic World. Just given the smallness of that, I find that more refreshing. But my overall point is that some of these smaller, almost indie-like movies that have these mid-budgets that could take them further than what they would do a few years ago, that's what I'm more looking forward to than anything else.
Yeah, and usually throughout the summer, there's always 1 or 2 that pop up that we weren't familiar with going into the summer. I think of something like The Beast last year, the French film. I think that was
French film. Yeah,
that wasn't a film that was on our radar heading into the summer, and then that ended up being one of the best films halfway through the year, and one of the best films at the end of the year, as far as I'm concerned.
It's a good movie.
So, I'm also looking forward to whatever that is this year. What is going to be the film that kind of comes out of nowhere that's maybe not on our radar as it stands now, as we are recording this, that ends up being the film of the summer season.
Yeah.
That kind of surprises. And so I am looking forward to that. But yeah, to your point, if I'm going to do a quick 3, and I'm going to be utterly predictable here, because it would be The Phoenician Scheme. It would be Materialists, because those were in my top 5 at the beginning of the year. So it would be disingenuous for me to exclude them here. And then probably The Life of Chuck. Like, that trailer blew me away. Like,
it's a good trailer.
I know it had the hype. I know it had the TIFF win, but that wasn't enough for me. It really was the trailer itself.
I think it's a good trailer. I really do. I know
great.
it. I know it garnered a lot of attention, for better and for worse. I don't really know why, but I think it looks like a very romantic, old school kind of movie.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I look forward to it.
Me too.
All right, Brendan, let's talk about coffee. I love
Medicine.
coffee.
Adult medicine. Necessary. We need it.
The absolute best. We do love it. If you're going to drink coffee, you need to drink great coffee. There's no sense in going to the store and buying nonsense that you have to fill with milk and sugar and creams and all kinds of nonsense. You just don't need it.
You know, if it was designed to taste bad in the first place, it's probably not good.
It's not good. Look, I made a mistake earlier in the week, Brendan, because I went to one of our baristas locally here, and I said, you know what? I'm in the mood for something different.
Have you been spoiled?
Maybe. Look, I spoiled it. Well, yes, is the moral of the story. I'm about to get to that here in a second. But for the sake of the story, I went to a barista and I said, can I get a salted caramel latte? That's what I said.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe I was craving like a dessert, and I don't really eat much during the day, so that could have been part of it, just wanting something more substantive. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what? Let's go with salted caramel latte. I got that thing. I couldn't drink it. I could not drink it. It was
it was too sweet and too dense.
It was so dense, and there was no coffee to be had. Like, it was all sugar and caramel.
You were
nonsense.
Basically drinking caffeinated cake. Is basically what you were
drinking. I got it. I took like 3 sips and tossed the rest away. Like, I couldn't do it, and I just went and got a pour over instead.
That just sounds so gross.
That's the brilliance of coffee cult. It has spoiled me, because that coffee is so good. You don't need to add anything to it. It has natural, robust flavors, whether it be fruit forward or chocolate forward, whatever you're craving. It has immense natural flavors. That's what makes Coffee Cult great. They source specialty grade coffee from all over the world, and you got to go check it out. That's Coffee Cult, coffee with the K, call with the K, coffeecult.com. Go check them out. They got all kinds of great single origin coffees, great blends, dark roast, medium roast. They have espresso coffee, whatever you need, they have it. Go to coffeecult.com at checkout. Use our code ISF25. Again, that code is ISF25. That gets you 15% off at Coffee Cult.
Heck yeah.
And you won't regret it. You're going to be drinking great coffee. You're going to get addicted to great coffee, and you'll never
Natural
go back.
coffee, organic
It's so
coffee. Good stuff.
That's the best. Yeah, so coffeecult.com, ISF25 at checkout, and we thank Coffee Cult for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about t-shirts.
Oh, okay.
talk
For those
about-
watching on YouTube, JD, stand up. Let's do a little bit of modeling here.
Little modeling here. This is our latest, one of our latest.
Look at
t-shirts
that
we
view.
have
Look
here.
at that view.
I just got this in the mail today.
Oh,
I
you
love
lucky
it.
man. And for those who have been active listeners of the InSession Film Podcast, you know how much we like to talk about film scores.
Film scores,
So
yeah.
this very much speaks to us right now.
Yeah, I love this one. I spent a lot of time on this one with Brendan's help, of course, and I love it. The T-shirt just says, for those listening, it says Film Score Junkie, and it has like a little logo kind of thing that we put together. It's great. So if you're a film score junkie like me, join the Junkheads and get your T-shirt.
That does not
Get
sound
your-
wrong at all.
No.
I might wear. I might have to wear this one on stage when my band does a gig at some point
Yeah,
soon.
yeah. It's a great T-shirt when you're on stage playing in a band.
Yeah.
If you want to get your Film Score Junkie shirt, you can go to InSessionFilm.com/store, or you can shop our official merch through Dashery at InSessionFilm.dashery.com. We have a whole website page dedicated to just our merch there, InSessionFilm.dashery, DASHERY, dashery.com. And you can check out all of our designs there. We have this one. I haven't gotten it yet, but we put up a new design over the weekend as well that just says, I'm like Jesus because I love sinners. So if you're
Perfectly
a fan
in
of
time with
sinners-
the Easter holiday, which just concluded.
exactly. That'll be the next one that I get. I can't wait for that. But you can get that one. We have Movies Are My Expensive Form of Therapy. We got a Substance design. We got Lester Bangs. All kinds of fun things up there. And we're going to be adding more designs as we go. If you have an idea, let us know. Hit us up.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll create something for you. So
Yeah.
we're always looking for ideas. So InSessionFilm.com/store or InSessionFilm.dashery.com. Either way, you'll be able to see all of the designs that we have to offer. And it's not just T-shirts. They come in stickers and magnets and mugs, all kinds of things.
iPhone cases, ties, whatever
Yeah.
you want.
Whatever you want. So go and check that out. And we appreciate everyone's support. All right. With all that said, let's go ahead and transition here to our Best Picture movie series. So we are winding down here talking about the 1960s. Again, to reiterate, in case you have joined us partially through or halfway through this series, we are doing this a decade at a time, 10 weeks, going through the 1960s. In this case, we did the 1940s last year. So if you missed any of our conversations on the winners of the 1940s, you can go and check those out in the InSession Film archives at InSessionFilm.com. And we are now rounding out the 60s here with Midnight Cowboy. This is a film that both Brendan and I have seen before. I believe you noted that you have seen this film.
Yep. This was
I
maybe
have
the
as well.
third. I think for the purposes of this review, this may have been the third time I've seen it.
Yeah, second or third time for me for sure.
Yeah.
I can't really recall, but I have seen the film before. Definitely have seen the film before. And there's certainly plenty to talk about given the context of this series. And I am excited to dive into that.
All I'll say is this, we're ending the 1960s Best Picture winning series here with this movie, which means we will eventually move to a new decade at some point. I feel like given this transitional point in Hollywood, we have no choice but to go to the 70s next. I feel like we might have to.
Yeah. We might have to. Yeah. Yeah. Midnight Cowboy. This is a film that won 3 Oscars. It won for picture, obviously, director, and also screenplay. As it stands, it is the only X-rated film or equivalent of the current NC-17 to win Best Picture. I don't think that will, but who knows? We're in a new era in 2025. So,
I mean, the criteria has changed. The criteria has changed as far as how the MPAA defines ratings now, because just like it's just shifted so much. I mean, look at the movie that just won Best Picture. There's a gratuitous nature to Anora, right? Imagine a movie like that back in 1969. That would absolutely be an X-rated
honestly,
movie.
Now that you say that, in terms of its explicit content, Anora is more explicit than Midnight Cowboy.
It kind of is. And I mean, I don't mean to get ahead of myself, but I bring up a movie like Anora for a very specific reason, because I don't know if Sean Baker has ever cited Midnight Cowboy as one of his favorite movies, but I can kind of see a lot of his, I could see a lot of him in this one.
There's a lot of Sean Baker in Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah.
Whether consciously or subconsciously, he was influenced by that film. There's no doubt
I
about
think
it.
so. I think so.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Are you ready to get into this? Is there any other context that you feel like you need to kind of get off your chest before we go here?
I'll just simply say, and this will certainly play into our thoughts on the movie, just given the influence that it had, whether it be consciously or even subconsciously, as you talked about. I rewatched this movie with my wife in the room, and full disclosure, she was only passively with the movie. It's just not quite her type of movie. But there are a few moments here that she very, very instinctually recognized. One of them being Dustin Hoffman's Ratso slamming on a car, crossing the street, going, "I'm walking here. I'm walking here."
One of the most iconic lines in all of cinema.
It is. But she made a great point, and I have to give her credit for this. How this movie may have spearheaded every New York stereotype going forward. It just goes to show how influential that it was. So I wanted to make that known, just given the influence of this movie and how it might play into our overall thoughts on it.
Every single American at one point or another in their lifetime has uttered the phrase, "I'm walking here." And you've said it just like that.
Yeah.
Don't deny it. If you're denying it, you are a liar, and you know where liars go. Okay?
This basically is the precursor to, "You talking to me? You talking to me?"
Exactly.
But
everyone's done that too. Yeah.
But it's very appropriate because I can also see a little Scorsese influence in this one too. There is that urban griminess certainly bleeds into other filmmakers and what they would tap into.
Yep. Certainly a lot to discuss given the context of the late 60s and this film's influences for sure.
We're very much in the American New Wave. The new Hollywood has begun.
Yes, absolutely. We did talk about that a few weeks ago, that the film or the American New Wave started in 1967. There's no doubt about that. Historians, cinephiles, critics, I think we can all agree that 67 was really the launching point.
Yeah.
But boy, you get to 69, things really start to kick into a new gear.
They do.
And I'm excited to talk about that here. So Midnight Cowboy, it is directed by John Schlesinger, and it stars Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman. And honestly, that's pretty much it. There are certainly other characters that come and go throughout the film, but in very small, brief, borderline cameo appearances. It is primarily Voight and Hoffman, those two characters. It is the relationship between Joe Buck and Ratso, as he goes by,
Yeah.
or Rico.
Rico, he asks to be called by
He
in
asks
his
to
own
be called
home.
Rico.
Ironically, his own home, which is condemned.
Yeah.
Not really his
A
home.
condemned apartment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into this. If you are not familiar with Midnight Cowboy, it is about a naive hustler who travels from Texas to New York City to seek personal fortune, finding a new friend in the process. All right, let's jump into this. Brendan, what did you think about Midnight Cowboy?
I freaking love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. I've loved it before, and we talked about how great this series has been. The 1960s Best Picture winning series has been thus far, and how the Academy kept getting things right. I think this is another example of it. I think this is one of the better films we've talked about in this series, and I've always loved it, but I think I liked it more even on this rewatch, just given the context of how Hollywood was shifting into this new wave of Hollywood filmmaking. We saw glimpses of it beforehand, but now we're really here full swing. Even though we've also had examples of movies like Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, which didn't go on to win Best Picture, but really had elements of that experimentation.
And they were nominated, to be fair.
They were nominated. They didn't go on
as
to
well.
win, but they were
Yeah.
nominated. But here's a movie that really goes full on into that form of experimentation. The editing here is a complete enigma, and I mean that as a positive. It is so nightmarish and almost incomprehensible at times. It really takes advantage of that idea of visual storytelling as opposed to narrative storytelling. You really have to pay attention to what we're seeing in a nightmarish and haunting way to really kind of get a sense of what's going on beneath the surface and what's fueling these character motivations. And I really appreciate that about the film. And I also didn't really remember how funny this movie kind of is. It's not necessarily a comedy per se, but there's an awkwardness and an uncomfortability to certain situations that actually make the movie really funny. It's very much a fish out of water situation, which I think can be very funny instinctually. And I think this movie taps into that very well. And I think just as a tonal balancing act, what John Schlesinger is doing, I think is really quite impressive. So all of those things, all of those ingredients just make the movie so powerful for me. But I think on top of that, what really works for me is that it's the loneliness underneath all of that. I've often cited that this is one of the loneliest movies I think I've ever seen, at least as far as Oscar contenders are concerned, because there really is a palpable loneliness in the experience of Joe Buck and what he's searching for and what he physically can't get. And the idea of him being so lost in a sense of place that is all about finding yourself, or at least what's perceived about finding yourself, the big city where there's so many people around, and how the more people that are there, the lonelier and more lost you ultimately become. Like that on its face, that thematic idea is so influential in so many Hollywood movies. Not even Hollywood movies, just movies in general. We talked about that very theme in a movie like All We Imagine Is Light from last year. That was very much the theme, and there's a little bit of this movie into that. Like there is a ripple effect there for sure. And it just goes to show the precedent that Midnight Cowboy really laid. And I love how this movie was really challenging the form, not just physically, but also thematically and socially. There are undercurrents of closeted homosexuality being explored here as well, which was very unprecedented for 1969. So there's a lot about this movie I respect, but man, it is a very palpable and lonely experience. And it is not for everybody, but I find it to be a very moving film.
Okay, I will do my best to articulate this, but I do think words fail to express how jarring it is going from Oliver to this film. It is unbelievably jarring. It is incredible.
That's like going from
experience.
That's like going from Mrs. Miniver to this movie. I mean, we've jumped 2 decades aesthetically speaking.
Like it is crazy the jump from Oliver to Midnight Cowboy, which given the context of this series and covering the 60s, that blew my mind. I almost texted Brendan 10 minutes into this going, I got to take a break and catch my breath because my God, this is so wildly jarring. But that is the brilliance of it, as the American New Wave does kick into a new gear, as you're talking about there, Brendan, and why this film is so remarkable. It is incredible. I agree with you. This is absolutely one of the best films that we've discussed in the 60s. The experimental nature of the film, I agree with you. I love the non-linear storytelling, the way it uses flashbacks and fantasy to depict trauma or the fantasies that these characters are experiencing. It is really incredible. There's a lot of quick cuts, a lot of montage editing that is unfolding, and it is hallucinatory. It is very disorienting. It is hypnotizing in all of the best ways. And I love how that isn't just here for filmmaking sake, for cinema sake.
Yeah.
I do love how that mirrors the psychological states of Joe and Rico as well. There is purpose to the editing, as disorienting as it is throughout the film. And I love that, coupled with the cinematography on the whole. I think the cinematography, the set design, the way that it establishes New York and the various pockets that these characters find themselves in.
This movie could have come out today and it looks just as fresh as it did back then.
I agree. And I think part of what makes it so engrossing is how the film's aesthetics, how its editing and its hallucinatory state couples with what you were talking about in terms of the deep sense of isolation and disillusionment that both Ratso and Joe exhibit in this film. And boy, that is felt. That is really, really felt, the way these characters are seemingly looking for something. I love the irony that they consider themselves these con men that they're somewhat proud of, but really the only person that they're fooling are themselves.
Yeah.
And how the film deconstructs that over the course of 2 hours is brilliant. It certainly says a lot about America and its state of affairs in the late 60s, but also on a personal level, how easy it is to get wrapped up in the myth of the American dream, only for it to chew you up, spit you out, and leave you completely disillusioned. And the only thing that keeps these two going is their friendship. It is their relationship. You have two broken men finding solace in each other amid that crushing loneliness, and how the film taps into the vulnerability of both of those characters without ever getting overly sentimental. There really isn't an ounce of sentimentality here, which is quite incredible given where this film ends. But I do.
It could have very much been sentimental, but it doesn't ever feel like it.
Doesn't.
It never feels overly schmaltzy.
I agree. Like it is stoic. It is heartbreaking and tragic, but that is because of how the film treats these characters and how it gives empathy to them, and the performances here. Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman, phenomenal. They're both really, really incredible here. And I love how emotionally overwhelming the film is, despite that stoicism, despite being unshowy in its presentation, and how it taps into the alienation of these characters, how it deconstructs their masculinity over the course of the film, all while exhibiting the brokenness of America of the late 1960s and the collapse of the American dream. All of that is tethered impeccably here. Impeccably. Phenomenal movie.
Yeah.
I'm provoked to use the M word here.
I think it is. I very much
quite
am.
masterful.
This is a 5 out of 5 star rating for me on Letterboxd. I'm going to go that far. It's one of the best movies we talked about in this season. And, you know, at the end of this conversation, we might give our ranking of the 10 movies that we talked about in this series of Best Picture winners of the 1960s. But I will say Midnight Cowboy is certainly towards the top. The more you talk about the way that the American dream is treated in this movie, I acknowledged how this movie may or may not have influenced the likes of Sean Baker or Pyle Kapadia with a movie like All We Imagine Is Light. But I guess it's also an influence on the brutalist, just given the way it treats the American dream and the deconstruction of the American dream. And none of these movies feel at all alike. And yet somehow Midnight Cowboy can find a way bleeding into all of those, which I guess it just goes to show the brilliance of it. And it certainly feels of a piece with where the American New Wave was going, which was certainly about challenging the form and experimenting with different filmmaking tropes. But many of these movies were also about what it meant to be in America at that time. If anything, I would say this movie, Midnight Cowboy, is more in line with something like Dennis Hopper's Easy Rider. I think that's maybe maybe the most comparable thing I can think of as far as that deconstructionist mentality and how broken America ultimately is. And I think this movie taps into that by also showcasing how different America can be depending on where you're from specifically, and how culturally America is kind of a melting pot. They acknowledge that just because Joe Buck comes from Texas, his demeanor and his way of life, that's not going to translate well in New York, regardless of how much he thinks it could. He thinks because of how much of an outlier he is, people will gravitate towards that. But no, they absolutely won't. I think it's Ratso that even says to him, and this is where maybe the film's notions on closeted sexuality come into play. He says, your cowboy stuff is for fags. And I'm quoting the movie there, so hopefully it doesn't sound too demeaning by saying it that way. That's a direct quote from the movie. But it just shows how different Texas and New York are from each other specifically. And America is ultimately that. And I like how it acknowledges that. It acknowledges how varying the country is. And that makes it so much harder to find yourself. And that lostness is so palpable throughout this entire movie. It really gets into the heart of what it means to be lost in a place that is so populated, and how ironic that notion is. It really is something special.
No, I think it's really great. And while the film, as we've been talking about it, impeccably weaves masculinity and sexuality into these broader themes on the American dream and how broken that is by the late 1960s. And that is depicted extremely well here, not just in terms of the storytelling, but again, aesthetically, the rundown, condemned apartment that Rico lives in is certainly indicative of that in some incredible ways. But I think what the movie does brilliantly as well is how it taps further by demonstrating how American culture sells identities that don't really work anymore, but that's all these guys know, and that's what they've tapped into. That to me is what's incredible about Joe, in that he isn't just this naive kid from Texas, but he's cosplaying a fantasy that America has sold for decades up until that point, right? The rugged cowboy that women will throw themselves at. That's something that is
the John Wayne thing. I think he even talks about that. Yeah.
Which is brought up in, like, there's a moment where he's like, I'm John Wayne. And he's like putting on the hat and looking at himself in the mirror.
Yeah.
But by 1969, the cowboy myth was already dead. So his outfit is ridiculous. It's outdated, but he's still playing into the role despite it really having no real power anymore. And the city, which comes through in the women characters here, but also Rico as well, they see right through it. They see through the facade. And you can say the same thing about Ratso as this hustler, tough guy, that persona that he tries to put on, but he also is someone that is weak. He struggles to walk even down the road. And then, of course, over the course of the film, he gets really sick. So that facade quickly breaks apart as well. So, you know, it isn't just this story about poverty and friendship, but I do think it is also very much about the collapse of performative American identities, and that the script that these characters had been given by the culture, they were doomed to fail them. But that's all they know. That's all they know. and how the film continues to deconstruct that as it goes, I think is really quite brilliant. Again, without ever being schmaltzy about it. It's never sentimental.
No, it's raw. It's so raw.
Just from moment to moment, I think that is the beating heart of every single scene. How do we tap further into that psychology to deconstruct this facade that these guys are carrying? As they're like you noted, they're searching for something. They think they're searching for some sort of identity. And the reason that they fail, it's only partially their fault. America is just as much to blame as it is the individual.
Well, and that's
part of the heartbreak here.
That's a relevant notion nowadays, isn't it?
It's very,
especially in our social media culture. That's very much a relevant idea on being sold a facade, a lifestyle in many ways. And that's ultimately what this movie is about. It's why so much of what we see here, as far as the film's use of nightmarish editing, as crazy as it is, it does a lot of intersplicing with radio broadcasts and television broadcasts to showcase what that lie is. There's a very key moment where I think we see Joe Buck getting dressed for some type of event, and it's intercut with some late night talk show very goofily dressing up this dog into some type of costume, which is the most bizarre thing anyone would ever do. You shouldn't do something like that. That's against the nature of that animal. And here is America kind of selling this facade, this costume that people are buying into. And I think that fuels exactly what you're talking about, which is why I think it's a very good point, that the American dream ultimately was this facade. It was a costume. And those who really try to strive for that find themselves exposed to the fakery of it. Yeah. And that's ultimately what's happening here.
Yeah. And I love that contrast in terms of how Joe sees himself versus others when he arrives in New York. Because when he first steps off the bus and full cowboy gear, the boots, the hat, the jacket, everything, he is looking at himself as if he's the most handsome man on the planet. And the camera lingers on him.
Yeah.
You get about this 2 or 3 second pause. It seems like it lingers forever, just to emphasize how out of place he looks in New York. And that is immediately followed up, right? So he thinks that he is going to be in demand because of this facade he's putting on, but he's actually inadvertently putting a target on his back, right? And that is indicative when he starts to have these romantic adventures, as he's trying to court these older women. I specifically think of that first moment he has with the Cass character, where they have this intimate moment, and it is playful. And going back to the experimental nature of the movie and its rating, where they both get naked and have their little sexual conquest there. But in the aftermath of it, what we see is that Joe's myth of that sexual conquest is actually quite hollow. Instead of being a fantasy object, he's actually emasculated in the moment and feels exploited. And that happens a couple of times throughout the film.
Yeah. It's a very brief scene with Cass there. Sorry to cut you off, but Sylvia Miles, who plays Cass, also nominated for this movie for a very brief scene, and just goes to show the impression that she leaves.
Absolutely. And it is an important moment here.
Yeah.
Where because that's the first time in probably his life, at least that's what the film seems to suggest, that he's not really in control, and that maybe he is being a little exploited, that maybe that facade, there's cracks in it, and how that cowboy identity isn't the shield that he thinks that it is, and that it's actually built on deep personal trauma. And I love how the film explores that as well, again, through its experimental filmmaking and some of the flashbacks that we do see. It is quite incredible how those flashbacks, and they come, at various points throughout the film. And while we never actually see these pivotal moments like real deep, meaningful conversations that he has with his grandma. Like those brief glimpses are. There's something about the execution of them that gives the film such a deep pathos that just adds to that psychological complexity in Joe. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's less interested in the what of it all. And John Schlesinger, as a filmmaker, is more interested in the sense of insecurity it's meant to give off with regard to Joe Buck and his upbringing. And that's all we need to know. We don't really need to know as much of what he went through, whether it be his experiences with his grandma and how his grandma raised him, or whatever may have happened between him and his girlfriend and that gang of cowboys, we'll simply say. A lot of that is still... I don't want to say it's unclear. I think the movie clearly emulates what happened there, but it's sort of one of these instances where if you watch the movie for the first time and you blink too much, you might miss it. You might miss what happens. Yeah. But there is still this sensation of insecurity in Joe, given whatever we see there. And I think the film is still very successful in emulating what that emotion is. It's very much creating a sense of feeling as it is a sense of narrative. It's less interested in that, and I think that's what makes the movie so effective. It's a sensory experience for better and for worse.
Yeah, I agree, and I do love how the film builds the emotion of this film through its filmmaking and the editing, as we talked about. As chaotic as it is, there is a riveting purpose to it, and how that couples with the storytelling and and how it builds on these characters and the performances is really quite great. And to speak to something you said earlier about the sexuality of this film and how that is deconstructed in these characters a little bit throughout the film, I think that very much tethers to what we're talking about here in terms of identity and this facade, because I also can't help but think of two other scenes in this film with Joe. One of them is Joe's initial disdain for Ratso when Ratso calls him a fag or whatever the phrase is there, and he has a response, a pretty visceral response. I ain't no fag. He is his response back. Yeah. And that establishes weirdly the, the initial reservations that these two characters have, but they do sense the isolation and loneliness in each other. That's what draws them together. But the way the film continues to deconstruct that sexuality throughout the film, I do think is fascinating, because on one hand, perhaps you could argue that there's some sort of curiosity. In the end, though, I think the relationship between them is reminiscent of something like, of course, in a more different tonally, but I couldn't help but think of something like Pixar's Luca. I was just thinking
about Luca, a movie that's able to have its cake and eat it too by not getting too literal in what that definition is.
100%. I think that's exactly what this film is doing in terms of the sexuality or potential sexuality that's there, or maybe it's wholly platonic, and these two characters discover that vulnerability in each other, and that's what draws them together. But there's also another moment here that makes me question Joe a little bit further, and it's another moment that he has with another older lady later on, and this is near the end of the film.
Is this the Shirley character played by Brenda Vaccaro?
Yes.
The actual encounter that he has where he's able to, at first, not perform sexually?
Yes, and they're playing games, he's trying to... and part of this is that he had taken drugs, I believe. I'm trying to get the time.
Oh yeah, he was at this Andy Warhol themed party, so he may have smoked something, whatever it was. But they end up
that could be part of it.
Yeah, but they end up playing this game of scribbage, and she calls his bluff in a certain way.
She calls his bluff, and straight up, I shouldn't say straight up, but she doesn't hold back in going, do you not want to be with women? And when he hears that, when he understands what she is suggesting, and again, it's pretty direct, then he acts on the moment.
Yeah. What does she say? Like, I guess that he picks a certain word that I guess, either begins or ends in Y. And she
Yes, yes,
challenges
yes.
his bluff by saying gay ends in Y.
That's true. Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
was. That's what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And so when when he hears that and he connects the dots, then it's like, okay, no, I'm here. I can perform. And he does. And so he goes on to perform, but we are left questioning with Joe there, is he just performing because she called him out? Or is there more to the moment? Does that explain further how he reacts to Ratso throughout the film? Maybe it does. Maybe it does. But like, again, like that lingering sexuality and the questions around that for Joe as the film deconstructs his cowboy persona, I think that is extremely blistering here.
That's why I'm so glad this movie with that particular story choice came out in 1969. Because I think in any other year, especially nowadays, if this were a more contemporary movie, it would have been more literal in exploring that homosexuality a bit more directly. And not to say that that's a bad thing, it just would have made for a very different movie and maybe even a more obvious movie. But by coming out when it did, when Hollywood, even at the time, was a bit cautious about how it wanted to explore these ideas, it made for a more cryptic and nuanced experience. So you can have an experience like this and view it as an outsider, and you can have different interpretations as to whether this movie is about closeted homosexuality or not. And I think both perspectives have merit. I think both have a correctness to them. I think this movie could easily be interpreted as a story of closeted homosexuality and the insecurity that comes with that. Or perhaps it's just about the sensitivity of men, and maybe in this case, straight men. And that's also part of the conversation as well. I think this movie is able to have it both ways. And that's why I think a comparison to a movie like Luca, which I think is very underappreciated as far as a movie that's able to have its cake and eat it too, I think is actually another great comparison to something like this. It just goes to show how influential this movie is when we're able to compare it to a Pixar movie now. And
I know
it has merit in that comparison.
Extremely influential, whether these other filmmakers and films are aware of it or not. You do see Midnight Cowboy in a lot of movies today. I very much do agree. And again, I cannot reiterate enough. I do love that duality within the film sexuality and how that can be interpreted. I think the film gets to have its cake and eat it too. And how that fuses with the film's ideas, broadly speaking, on America. I do think that every failure that we see here in these two characters, the broken dreams that they display throughout the film, and the deep loneliness that is on display. It isn't just bad luck. It also taps into the collapse of the American myth. That is also what this film is very, very much about, which is what I love about the dichotomy of them trying to find success in New York City. The American dream is probably most synonymous with New York City.
Yeah.
That's the city that never sleeps. It's the city of success. You go to New York City, you find your success. And yet we have these two characters that are deeply vulnerable, that are disillusioned, lonely, and finding consolement in each other. And the thing in the end that they choose to do is escape that.
Yeah.
The duality of New York to Florida, I think, is incredible. Like, they just look at Florida as some sort of fantasy world, somewhere where they can escape and get away from all of this. And again, given what we see on the bus ride, it is incredibly poignant and heartbreaking, and heightens that fantasy versus reality dichotomy all the more. And I love that here. I think that in execution is astounding.
I often wonder what happens to Joe Buck when they actually get to Miami and what he chooses to do, if he even really learned anything, because running away to Miami is maybe just another runaway endpoint for him. This movie kind of has that circular arc for its main character, which we often talk about as one of our favorite arcs in any movie, where they sort of start and end at the same place, But at least here you can argue that Joe has maybe gained at least a little of proper perspective, that maybe he'll start to make the right choices going forward. But he still carries that same lostness that he has for much of this movie. He's just gained, the experience of a proper relationship with someone to maybe learn the right lessons from it.
Yeah.
But it's very powerful. That ending it's not a tearjerker. It's not schmaltzy. And in any other filmmaker's hands, it could have been. But it lingers with you. Like, it's a very hauntingly sad ending. And I often think about it.
No, yeah, I think it is incredibly saddening, but I do agree with you. Like, the film isn't trying to provoke you into tears sentimentally like a lot of other movies do. It's simply arresting and how it portrays these two characters, the isolation, how they treat each other throughout the film. And there is always a little bit of volatility between them, even when that relationship is at its peak. There are moments where they're still rubbing each other. But in the midst of them giving each other a hard time, they also do a lot for each other. And there's this weird domesticity to their relationship where they're cooking food for each other, and it's often endearing and charming, and they're living this life together even though their life is in this
It's
a condemned building.
It's kind of a romance movie without being as literal of a romance movie. And again, it goes back to how we talked about this movie being able to have its cake and eat it too, by not getting too literal about what its orientation is, like what it's going for.
And I love how it breaks down that relationship. I love them, like, from scene to scene, the dynamic between Voight and Hoffman is incredible. It's really, really incredible. And to your point earlier, as far as Joe and where things go for him, I think what's interesting, and maybe this is a slight spoiler, but it's necessary for this conversation.
It's an old movie.
We do, it came out in 1969, after all. But there comes that moment where Joe does shed the cowboy facade. He
very literally,
shed that very literally as they're en route to Florida. And given what we see there at the end of that film, does Joe learn anything from this? Does he go to Miami and continue this same cycle of disillusionment? Maybe. There's certainly an argument to be made there, especially given what we see there with Ratso, because that's like, that relationship is what was giving him agency.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
and then that gets
his
stripped
trip
away.
to New York, and then that's stripped away.
Yeah.
So when he gets to Miami, what is he supposed to do? Does he do the same thing but with a different facade, or has he learned from this? I think that argument honestly goes both ways, and it's interesting about like the reinvention there at the end of the film, changing costumes. Is that enough, or does the damage run deeper than that? I don't know.
But it's possible he regresses back into that, maybe with just a different costume, only out of desperation because he's lonely once again.
Exactly.
And I think the movie is very much interested in stimulating that kind of conversation out of us. It's a very smart movie that's willing to trust its audience. And I love that something like this came out in 1969 to do that. It really feels like this could have come out only a few years ago. It has a freshness to it, but I think a lot of that also could be just how good the modern transfer is. I watched this on my Criterion disc, and it is a wonderful transfer that looks as modern as any other modern movie nowadays. It's almost uncanny how this movie is over 50 years old. It is absolutely astounding.
Yeah, it's great. And I just want to echo again the performances by Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman. They're absolutely incredible together. Hoffman's performance is interesting even in the context of this series, because just a few years ago in 1967, the film didn't win Best Picture, but he's obviously in The Graduate, and
Yeah.
his performance here is a total transformation from what he does in The Graduate.
Just vocally.
Talk about jarring again.
If you watch this movie without any picture to associate it with, you would think it'd be two different actors. Just the vocal mannerisms are so different.
It's so different. Such a very, very different type of performance. The physicality that he brings here, and like not just vocally, but with his body as well. And I just love how Hoffman rides that line of being, and part of this is also the writing, but the morally grayness of the character, how he taps into that while also being so deeply empathetic in the end as well.
Yeah.
Is really quite incredible. And I guess you can say the same thing about Voight as well, like how he taps into that myth, the cowboy myth, how that is deconstructed over the course of the film. Like he, as a performer, has to sell that with his performance, and I think he does such a great job of bringing a subtle pathos to that we also feel for Joe. And this, again, it's subtle. Everything about this film is, at least emotionally speaking, the filmmaking is quite brazen. But the emotionality of this film, as we've been talking about, it is ardent, but all done through subtlety, and it's great.
A great filmmaker,
really great.
A great filmmaker knows how to direct and portray something very brazenly and very loudly, but only at the service of such subtlety. Like that's a hard thing to do, and this movie does that very well. It's a very loud and brazen movie, just given some of the editing choices it makes, which are honestly astounding and perhaps in a way should have been illegal at the time. And yet it only makes the movie that much murkier in a way, which I love. Like I love how it's able to do both simultaneously. It really is quite great.
I agree. And in a lot of ways, this is kind of the perfect Oscar winner, because it's got all of this incredible experimentation and filmmaking that we love, that we adore. This is not a film that was taking it like this was not a safe movie by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And was very much tapping into the American New Wave in that regard. But it does have this, as we're talking about, this subtle emotion to it that by the end of the film, even though it's not schmaltzy, you do feel the emotion, which we know the Academy loves. They love for films that provoke you deeply in that way. So like in a lot of ways, it is kind of the perfect Oscar winner, given the Academy's flavor, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you know how this film became the influential masterpiece that it is.
Yeah, great movie. I think
Good stuff.
I guess as we wind this down, should we look back at the movies we talked about in this series and maybe try to rank some of these as far as what our favorite ones were?
Yeah, we can. To reiterate, we have The Apartment, West Side Story, Lawrence of Arabia, Tom Jones, My Fair Lady, The Sound of Music, A Man for All Seasons, In the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier.
Thank you, Oprah.
Oliver, and of course Midnight Cowboy, as we just talked about. So
yeah, it's a good crop. That's overall a good crop.
I think it's very good.
Yeah,
like there's a top 5 here that I think is great.
Kind of a slew of all timers in that way.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and I sort of alluded to this. I think it was last week, JD, where I said if I were to make any type of hot take as far as my favorite movies from the 1960s to go on to win Best Picture, there is a chance that Lawrence of Arabia would not be in my top 3 of this decade. It's not in my top 3.
Okay.
Even though I think it might be the best of these, just given the craftsmanship of it. But I think my favorite 3 of the movies we talked about are, in no order at this point, The Apartment, The Sound of Music, and Midnight Cowboy.
Okay. I mean, three masterpieces. I'm not going to push
Yeah,
back.
yeah. It's just Lawrence of Arabia is often cited as one of the greatest movies ever made. It might seem a bit
Yeah.
hot takey to not rank it as high as those others, but those three speak to me in such a way. And this rewatch of Midnight Cowboy just
Yeah.
solidified how much I love this one.
Well, for the listeners out there, let me offer some insight, especially if you're new here. Brendan, when we do rankings, and especially when we get to the end of the year, you'll know what I'm talking about. Brendan does not conform. That is not his.
I
his thing
conform
at
to
all.
Brendan. I conform to
He
me.
conforms to Brendan. Like when he had, I believe you had Oppenheimer at number 1, if I'm not mistaken. That might have been
me?
an outlier. Yeah.
When
Did
did
you
I
have
have that at
Oppenheimer
number
there?
1?
Maybe
That
you
was not,
did it.
no,
and maybe,
I did not have it. No, I
Okay,
had Perfect
see,
Days
there-
as my favorite movie of the year.
Exactly. So there you go.
So-
Never mind. Never mind. I was going to say that as like maybe that's an outlier, but that just goes to
that was the
prove
one and
further.
only time that I was a normie.
Yeah, exactly. Brendan does not conform. He does his own thing. So just kind of take that with a grain of salt or for what it's worth.
Except Oppenheimer was my number 2 of that year. If that's
Okay,
any
so
consolation.
it was number 2. It was still really high. Generally, though, Brendan's rankings are Brendan's rankings, and
Well,
you
okay.
just
Well, let me.
can't
I'll say-
expect.
Okay, well then let me
the
say
norm.
this: the last movie to win Best Picture, Anora, was my favorite of the nominees to win Best Picture. So I guess maybe that's
Yeah.
a normie response. So sometimes I
Well,
have them.
But see, that's also weird because I don't think that I saw Anora atop of many top 10 lists last year, despite it winning Best Picture, which is maybe ironic, but
I guess I just agree with the Academy for once, which maybe
For
is a
once.
normie response.
strange. Really strange. At any rate, that is to say, longtime listeners, no one here is surprised by Brendan's ranking here. But
Hey,
if you're
at
new,
least-
that's why
least I'm not-
Lawrence. Yeah.
Yeah, at least my top 3 isn't, I don't know, like Oliver, My Fair Lady, and Tom Jones.
Yeah, at least he didn't go crazy. Yeah. You still have 3 masterpieces up at the top, so it's fine. It's all good. Lawrence of Arabia is easily my number 1, though.
Okay.
That to me, that is an all-timer. It's an all-timer for a reason. That's one of the top 50 best movies ever made, hands down. After that, this is where it gets tricky for me because honestly,
Sure.
the 4 to follow, I think, can come in any other order. Honestly, when it comes to The Apartment, West Side Story, The Sound of Music, and Midnight Cowboy, you can rank those 4 however you want. And
That's fair.
I will not lose any sleep.
And
Like at all.
those 4 movies, along with Lawrence of Arabia as your number 1 there, so that's 5 movies there. Those are also my top 5 of
Yeah.
these 10 movies.
So we share the
talked
same
about.
5 then.
We share the
So,
same 5. It's just the order of them all.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
off the cuff, since we're just talking here, for the sake of the exercise, I'll say
Mhm.
Arabia, Midnight Cowboy, The Sound of Music, The Apartment, West Side Story.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my ranking off the cuff here. But honestly,
Yeah.
as I said, to reiterate, rearrange those however you want. I don't
Yeah. Yeah. We're not too far off. Off the cuff,
Yeah.
it would be probably number 1 for me, Sound of Music, then Midnight Cowboy, then The Apartment, then Lawrence of Arabia, and then West Side Story.
Okay. So we share the same 5. And then the bottom 5 again. I don't really have any sort of heated takes as far as the bottom 5 goes, other than the heat of the night is, I would say, fairly comfortably my number 6. And
Really?
then-
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, well,
Like,
I guess I'm
still
kind of
really
surprised by
appreciate
that.
movie.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
surprised. I thought you would have put A Man for All Seasons above that.
Well, okay. Yeah. All right. Again, the bottom 5, I don't have any sort of passionate feelings on. I do really like A Man for All Seasons in the same way that I like In the Heat of the Night. Sure. Yeah,
Sure.
we'll go A Man for All Seasons 6, In the Heat of the Night 7, and then Oliver, and then Tom Jones, and then My Fair Lady. That's
I
probably
think-
where I'll go.
I think we're pretty lockstep in the ranking of that bottom 5, even in that order. I think I too would go Man for All Seasons, In the Heat of the Night, Oliver, Tom Jones, and My Fair Lady.
Yeah. All right. Yep. That's where I'm at. Yep. That's where I'm at.
So there's Brendan and JD sharing the same brain
There
once
we go.
again.
There we share the same brain. So slightly same top 5, just ordered differently, and then the rest is the same. So
Good series.
decade. Look,
Good
I
series.
will say this as well. That top 5, and look, we haven't gone through every decade yet. We've only gone through the 2 decades. I would take that top 5 over my top 5 of the 40s. And looking ahead at the 70s, I would take that top 5 over my top 5 of the 70s as a collective. As a collective. That's a great question. Great point. I think there are some Best Picture winners of the 70s that are probably better than most, if not all, of the individual movies we talked about in the 60s. But I think as a collective, yep. There's an argument.
Okay, I would say,
But
you know
as
what?
a
I'm with you. I'm looking at. I don't want to say which movies they are yet because I think the 70s might be our next decade. Just think, given the transition of how America and the new Hollywood was coming to form, we might have to do the 70s next. But I will simply say there are 2 movies that won Best Picture in the 1970s that I might like more than any Best Picture winner of the 1960s.
There's one for sure I can say very confidently.
Yeah, and I think we both agree on what that film is. Maybe, I mean, it's pretty obvious what that film is, but I won't say what it is yet.
Yeah.
But,
It doesn't take a rocket scientist
let's
to figure
just,
that
let's
one
just
out.
say it's a movie that makes an offer we can't refuse.
Exactly, yeah.
But there are at least 2 movies, I think, that won Best Picture in the 1970s that I might like more than anything that won in the 60s. But you're right. As a collective top 5, I think the string of winners in the 60s was a better consistent offering.
Yeah. I mean, I was about to give it away, but I guess we already did give it away.
I guess we did. Yeah.
The offer we can't refuse is easily my favorite of the 70s and 60s for sure. But outside of that, I don't know. I mean, we're going to talk about some great films in the 70s. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know if as a collective it trumps that 5. And I don't know if on an individual basis, I don't know if any of the others would trump Lawrence for me.
Some of these I need to give a rewatch. I'll say that. There are some movies here I know I really liked when I first saw them, but it's been some time and I might end up souring on them. And then there are some I know I really liked, but I haven't seen in some time and might like more. I don't know.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah,
It'll
it'll
be
be
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say about Midnight Cowboy or the series at large, leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Letterboxd. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com, but we would love to hear from you either way. We'll go ahead and wind down. I know we've gone on a little long, but we really wanted to give Midnight Cowboy a fair and proper conversation there. We do have 2 reviews coming out this week. We're going to be talking about The Accountant 2, Gavin O'Connor, his latest, and The Shrouds from David Cronenberg, his new film. I got a chance to see that earlier today as we are recording this, and I can confirm it is a David Cronenberg movie.
I am looking forward to that then. I like David Cronenberg quite a bit.
Lots to talk about with The Shrouds. There's no doubt about it.
All right. Good to hear.
We'll do it. We'll get into it. So be on the lookout for that. New Women in Session this week as well. Dave and the writers always doing great work at InSessionFilm.com. So stay tuned for any articles, reviews that come out throughout the week as well. Do appreciate everyone that writes for the site. Love our staff, love our writers.
Yeah.
Be sure to subscribe to the show, whether, again, it's on YouTube, Apple Podcast, however you listen. Please subscribe to the show. We would love to talk with you each and every week about movies.
Absolutely.
It's why we're here. It's why we do this.
Absolutely.
All right, with all that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Midnight Cowboy.
Midnight Cowboy.
Ooh.
Influential, beautiful.
So hard.